are these people?
Who are these people? Hi, everyone. It's Indy. We're here for another one-on-one. And I've known this guy for, God, it feels like since he started aggregating independent clips. His name is Ryan. He's with the Independent Review. So let me bring him in. Hey, Ryan, what's going on?
Hey.
This is Ryan Graham, everyone. Independent Review, Indie Media Award honoree, class of 2023. One of the reasons, honestly, why I said I need to have a category for people who aggregate or edit videos, because there's a lot in independent media, and there were a bunch of people, several people like Orf and like Joe, who mix videos together. All right. And that's a skill and a talent that's never really recognized or acknowledged. And shit, man, I wanted to acknowledge it because I love it and I appreciate what you do. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So I had a few questions, of course. I definitely want more people to learn about you, about your show, about what you do and why. So the first question I like to start with people and one-on-ones is, how did we end up having this conversation? Which is a loaded question that can go in a lot of directions and really kind of backs out to how did we first meet? But more importantly, how did you get into doing this and what motivated you to start doing the Independent Review? By the way, you are now up to, I believe this week is episode 118, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And have you missed a week
yet?
Haven't
missed one. Haven't missed one yet.
Have not missed a week. That was one of my questions. Have you missed a week yet? So
not yet, close.
So the floor is yours. I want everyone to hear all about the Independent Review, how you got there, what you decide to do, and the whole damn thing. Go, man. I'm fascinated.
100%. I would say, let's see, we could kind of do an origin story of even how I got into, indie media and everything like that. And I would say it was actually my business partner. He referenced Whitney Webb in about 2019, summer 2019. So I would say I wasn't necessarily a mainstream media follower by any means. I was more into sports, if anything, of mainstream, but didn't buy into the two-party stuff. Just wanted to keep doing my thing and just focused on work. And he was like kind of getting into all the Epstein stuff in 2019, right before he was arrested and right before his, suicide. And he's like, you got to check out Whitney Webb and check out these articles she's written. I was like, oh, I don't know any of this stuff. I didn't know anything about Epstein or any of that stuff. And once I got into that was my 0 to 100 real quick, straight to, Whitney's stuff, which is very, very thorough, and started listening to all of her shows and, the show she was going on. And then let's see, who did I find? From there was kind of like, I'd find Ryan Cristian, I'd find James Corbett. I think I found at the time it was Truthzilla, Scott Armstrong, but it wasn't Rebunked News yet. And started, thankfully, I am very thankful I found those guys, because honestly, then going into 2020, that's when I had my second kid in like April of 2020. And
right in the middle of the pandemic.
I was glad. Oh, it was great. Yeah. In Oregon, of all places, is where I'm from, and near Portland. So it was
try to get a pregnant wife to a hospital in the middle of lockdown.
Yeah, it was a shit show. It was like, but at that time, I think it was early enough. They didn't know what to do. And I was just like, hey, let's just get the kid out and make sure he's healthy, and we'll be let's get the heck out of here. Let's not worry about anything else right now. It was, there's a bunch of stories behind that. That was fun. In its own self. But yeah, this area, not the best for, gosh, I mean, they were still doing mass stuff up until 2023 here. It was great. It was a joke, but yeah, but thankfully, because I found those guys, I could kind of find a real source of media that I could listen to on a weekly basis that really helped get me through it and give me more research and give me more, source material I could look up and not just listen to the mass idiots and people just panicking over everything. You know what I mean? And from there, I started doing a couple online stores through my main business, which is, custom t-shirts. We just do locally or nationally, kind of for anybody. And we were able to do some online shops, especially during 2020 when no one would come in our store. And Scott Armstrong, I give him credit. We were doing a store for him. And he's like, what you should, I think I told him the idea. I was like, it'd be cool is, Grand Theft World is an awesome show, but there's a lot of people kind of like myself at the time, who might be interested in that, but they just don't know about it. Because I was thinking, man, I was like, if my buddy didn't tell me about Whitney, and then I kind of fell down this, I wouldn't necessarily call it a rabbit hole, but you know how it is. You can't find any of these people just by Googling or on a regular YouTube algorithm, or, before everyone jumped to Rumble at that time, you just couldn't find any of these people. And you could
Right.
barely find them on podcasts. We know how censored Ryan was. It was insane. And I was like, man, people just don't know about it. So I told him, I was like, it'd be kind of cool if there was a more condensed version of Grand Theft World and more of a quote dumbed down version, shorter clips for not necessarily the TikTok generation, but lesser. It's just people's attention span. Get it quicker, maybe in an hour instead of 4 hours, and put the clips of all the media that I could find at the time that showed good information that weren't bought and paid for, and get that out in kind of a mainstream area, if that makes sense. Just less niche. Obviously now, you guys stream me, Steve Poikonen on AM Wake Up streams me, but your guys' audiences know this kind of stuff. So it was also a good way to show them if they missed anything, but also a good way to just get people's foot in the door without seeming, I'm not necessarily crazy, but people that just don't get to see it, right? So they can see that there's like actual journalists and actual people that report on this stuff that isn't, bought and paid for. So that was my idea. And I was like, someone should do that. And he's like, why don't you just do it? I was like, I don't know if I have time. So the thing I wanted for me, instead of listening to 15 different shows, was that I ended up having to listen to 15 different shows so I could put together something. And the whole cartoon idea was like, I've always liked, the South Park satire and, shitty animation and stuff like that. So I was like, I don't really have a budget for this stuff. So I'll just go on Animaker, make a trial account, make a bunch of clips, make some funny backgrounds, and just make it bad dubbed audio, or if it's AI audio, just to make it kind of funny with a little bit of humor with how dense, and dark the news can be at times for transitions. And that's kind of how it started. And then from there, I got to meet people like yourself. You were one of the first people to reach out to me, a bunch of others. And then from there, Steve, the amount of people I've met, at least virtually, it's been pretty cool though. It's one of the most, I think I told Ricky Varandas a while ago that was like, this independent media, I know there can be a lot of, any area, there cannot be the best people, but I've only run into really cool people, really helpful people, and friendly, and just growing up, I've only had 2 communities like that, and that was the rugby community, which is very niche and supportive, and this community. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's been really cool, and I have a similar arc / story, as far as getting into independent media, and Whitney Webb / Jimmy Dore / Graham Elwood, and Graham having Whitney on kind of introduced me to some of them. The Convo Couch I was a follower of pretty early on, Pasta and Fiorella. And I had met, and I think it was Richard Medhurst kind of that had sort of introduced me to some of that world, because he was on Discord, and I met a lot of these people that some of them that I'm still friends with to this day through that Discord. Cool. It's a real cool meeting place. And it's funny because Steve, for Slow News Day, had a Discord, and he was one of like kind of the ones that I had joined. And then he stopped doing that for a while. Somebody started a Telegram group for AM Wake Up, and I'll tell you, it's got the same feel as a Discord server. It really is. And I've never seen anyone use it like that. I haven't seen anyone else build a community with different channels the way that they have, which I think is actually really cool. They have that many people talking about that many things that they need that many channels to kind of weed through it all. And then I started using Discord also to create channels for each individual creator. And that's been a labor of love. Again, it's so hard to get people kind of understanding what that is and able to absorb the fire hose. So again, this is where it ties into what you do, is there is such a fire hose of independent media. It's hard to figure out where to find it. And I'll tell you that I found people through the Independent Review to watch. Monica Perez, for sure, and Hervoye Morik over at Cognitive Dissonance. They did a show together in Geopolitics and Empire. Some of the people, I know, Don Jeffries and Unity of the Unwanted people, even some of the Grand Theft World peeps, I was not really that into watching them, but because it's mixed in with shows that I do want to watch, the T-Labs and the Slow News Days and the Corbett reports, I'll sit down and I'll absorb that 10, 15 minutes. Be like, let me go check that out. Go follow their channel. And it's exactly what the point of what you were trying to accomplish, I think, with building this. And I wish more people, I wish the algorithm gave more love to compilation channels than it does. Right. I think it's an important, kind of medium to introduce people that won't go and sit on a 4-hour T-Lab show. But Ryan is like the most sourced creator I know. Like his lists, like every show, he publishes a web page that has a list of every single like tweet and article and everything. Like you can literally see exactly how he built the show, and it's so damn impressive.
It's amazing. It's amazing. That was such a big help too. And if you're trying to show, I know some people just don't want to see stuff, but it was such a good thing to point to in 2020, 2021, be like, well, here's his episode. And you would see every note with every link to every article or study that he was talking about. It's amazing.
Dude's a beast. He's a beast. And much in a similar way to the way that he's kind of put together T-Lab almost as a network. And also, because he has Whitney and Derek Wright with him and Robert N. Lakesh. I know he's had Matt Errett Wright in the past with him as well. They've kind of got their own little network going. And that was sort of an inspiration for INN, which we're on right now, because I saw that there are a bunch of smaller independents that by themselves and by ourselves, myself included, were missing something. It was all kind of incomplete. But if we kind of pull it, Super Friends resources, we kind of pull those ideas and we do a couple of shows together and share each other's stuff. And that's really been the concept behind the network, and have a one place for people to find a bunch of different shows so that they don't have to subscribe to all these individual channels, though we have them and maintain them.
Right.
So
I remember. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, how do you decide what's worthy, like as far as making a weekly show, because you're watching all of this content every week. You have to be watching it on 1.5 or 2x speed like I do, I'm guessing, to be able to get through it all.
Well, the benefit of right now of my terrible drive to my store is it can take up to 2 hours with traffic. So one way. And so depending on traffic in that day, I get a lot of podcasts in my vehicle. Now I did start switching just to do AM wake up in the morning, which is a little dangerous because it's the video. So I got to be careful one of these mornings. There was a story. We were on the we were on the Independent Review. We were on post on a Friday AM wake up. And who was it? Dude got into a wreck live on the show. That was fucking great. Oh, it was wild. I was like, that's gonna be me. I got to be careful. It's but that's how I will say. Before Steve's, I had a little less. I had structure, but the length of it was longer, if that makes sense. So sometimes it was shorter, just depending on the week. Weeks kind of fluctuate sometimes, although the last few years have been pretty news dense, right? So it's a little easier.
But still, it's hard to find content. Like, I curate articles, and some weeks it's a slog and a grind to find even 4 articles that I want to cover that are about something that everybody else in the space isn't talking about. And that, I think, is something that you also do, is you don't necessarily go to, here's what was in the news this week. It's what was interesting on a couple of different shows, and who had an interesting conversation about 2 or 3 things. And I think that also it ends up being have a longer shelf life. It's more timeless that way than about more current type of events.
Yeah, and God, what was I getting at? It's hard to going through what necessarily makes it or not. It's a little different now. I have a little more of a I kind of need to cut it around the 2-hour mark before I do. I always, Steve never asked me to do his clips, but I always would put his clips in anyway, because of, he's got that many shows a week. So what I do now, because I know he doesn't want to see himself, is I put all his stuff at the end and just do a compilation of his for the week. And but so the first 2 hours before, sometimes it'd go 1 hour, 3 hours. Now I kind of cut it right around 2. because he likes to jump on live after, and just kind of talk as you come on here and there, and kind of have a good time. So I have a little more structure of now I have to be a little more time conscious of like how much I can show on a clip. And sometimes I'm just like, man, I don't have enough time, or the rendering takes too long. And I'm like, I'm just gonna, put this in. Like a Corbett is one of my go-tos, right? New World next week, or if he's got a good solutions watch, that's almost a guarantee. It's an easy one to put in that open source a lot of people don't, see. And the other ones, what's funny is as much as I follow all these, it's funny how whether it's my Spotify or I use Podcast Addict or, even Rumble, YouTube, I'll check Twitter, I'll check Rockfin, Odyssey. It's funny how even my thread of stuff things get hidden so much, with the algorithm. So stuff I follow all the time will just be gone, and I'll forget about somebody for about a week or two and be like, dang, where was their stuff? I was like, oh, they've had shows going on. And I feel bad sometimes because I can't fit everybody, or they got lost on my algorithm, or like you said, sometimes these guys take weeks off, right? And so you just have a low week, and it's kind of hard to. I might have to stretch out a few more clips, to fill that time on those weeks, but.
Yeah, or go digging for news sources. And that was going to be my next one, which is how do you vet and find news sources while you're doing this?
That's a good one. I'm obviously no pro here, and I've kind of learned throughout, and yourself, God, everyone I've kind of met, Steve, Ryan, Scott, all those guys have kind of helped. Sometimes you kind of have a feeling of this seems a little fake, not to say fake, but maybe they don't seem as genuine. Some people, they're a little more the mainstream alternative, but what I do like to do, let's say, Whitney will go on some big ones, right? Like Glenn Beck. I'm obviously no Glenn Beck fan, but if I can get her out on those, I'll definitely still put that out there, not to promote Glenn Beck, but more to promote Whitney and the message she's putting out there. And what I'll try to do is sometimes I'll go back and see some of their older interviews and just see other people they found, and then try to scurry through their channels and see, let me think of a couple. Taylor Hudak was a good journalist.
Sure.
She does stuff for T-Laugh. She doesn't do stuff as recently, but that was one I kind of just found when she did a couple good interviews, and that Ryan would post, and that's kind of where I found, Derek Bros. I know he's big, but at first I didn't know any of these guys until they had those networks. And I think it was you who reached out to me, and I couldn't find you guys when I was originally looking, until you reached out to me, and then I could see your entire network. And then from there, I could see awesome stuff, with Reef and Colin and Jesse and Misty. I didn't know Misty. That was back when, TNT was going on too. And that was great stuff. I got a whole new avenue of people to find, like the Patrick, was it Henningsen?
Yep.
Other people like that.
21 Wire.
It was really cool. Yeah. It was really cool to find that whole new world of other people that I hadn't, because sometimes you get in a little bubble, and I always kind of want to expand that bubble. And then sometimes you get some, Ian Carroll type that are just trying to.
I was going to say, you got the T-shirt store, you got the mustache going on. People are going to confuse you two guys at some point.
I know. I need to grow my facial hair out more.
Right? We need a full-on beard, the scraggly
hair color. It's not
right?
good.
I've got a goatee. You can't see, but I've actually got like the thumb goatee style. So I'm good. And it's a little on the light side at this point. It's grayed out more than color than it used to have. It's a lot more salt and pepper.
I feel you. Same here.
Oh, dude, and it's managing. You've got young family, as do I, balancing kids. And I do live stream shows. So I was going to ask about like kind of the process of when do you start your week of aggregating? And I know you're still usually rendering like Wednesday night or Thursday night. So how do you take an hour here? Do you do it all in one block? Like, what's that process like? Do you start Sunday? Do you just kind of note and put something in a bookmark until you're ready to start doing it? Like, I just curated Jesse's clip show, so I have my own process, but I love to hear about what other people do and how they do it. And sometimes we learn from each other, So love to hear about that.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved, and it does change week to week, as you probably know, sometimes with your schedule, with family, work, kids got stuff. And so sometimes you can hit some bumps in the road where you need to take a left turn. or do a 180 and try to recuperate. But if, in a perfect week where I'm not slammed and I can kind of schedule things out, I usually almost completely shut off on weekends. Not to be anti-news or anything like that, but I get so wrapped up with my kids, and time with there. So I'm usually pretty shut off on the weekends, unless, someone gives me a call or wants to do something on a show. I'll definitely jump in. But during the week, I would say, Monday morning, get a little AM wake up. And then as I'm either finishing that, I'll always have something in the background at work or driving, and kind of go through my streams of, okay, what's on the feed today? What are the shows that are out today? And I'll kind of bookmark them. When I can download them in real time, I will, and then just save them. I usually have like a temp folder every week, this week, and I'll have an AM clip folder, and then I have everyone else that I'll save.
Mm-hmm.
And then by about Wednesday, I'll try to render all of Steve's stuff, because that's a lot of clips for, because it's about 3 hours every morning. So to cut through there, find some good interviews. A lot of times I'll do his, and then I'll get all of my transition clips or like an intro if I can think of something. If I have time for like a funny intro, with some stuff, I'll do that Wednesday. And then Thursday, I'll have all my shows that I was either listening to and kind of in my mental, or I'll write it down like a timestamp of like, okay, that was a good interview spot. And I will then begin all my rendering, if I can, early Thursday, or putting it together, and then do my rendering hopefully by Thursday afternoon. There's a lot of times where it ends up being late Thursday night or Thursday morning. And then if I'm crazy slammed, it'll just be like, okay, I know my go-tos. I need to go through as many clips as I can on Thursday, download them, clip them. Hopefully the thing doesn't freeze halfway through, and then try to upload it. I have a quicker computer at work, so if I can do it there, it's way better than my laptop here at home. It's just too slow. But no, I've had some, 4 or 5 a.m. mornings many times. I'll tell Steve, hey, it's coming, don't worry.
It's a grind, man. And again, so much respect for the guys that do it consistently, daily, weekly. You haven't missed a week in over 2 years. Okay. I don't know how, dude, that is a commitment. I don't even have that. I haven't missed. I have 1 week, I think, with the INN newsletter that I missed. It was like New Year's a year and change ago. Once in a while, I'll miss it. And again, nobody's paying us necessarily to do any of this stuff. So if we don't, it's not like a big loss, but it's important to us. And I get why you want to do that every week. It's important for the people. They kind of depend on it, rely on it, and they appreciate it. And there's so much behind it, and you don't want to lose momentum. And that's the other big thing that I look at, especially when it comes to analytics. And I noticed that you don't seem to give a shit about analytics, which I love. All right. No. It's like the analytics be damned. I can't stop looking at numbers.
I don't blame you.
And when I see a drop off because I haven't published in a couple of days, it like bothers me. And I know it totally shouldn't, but I know that the reach can get affected for a week if I miss 2 days.
Oh yeah.
It's
crazy how
it's
that
like
works.
We work so damn hard to get even the small followings that we get, and it's so frustrating to fight that algorithm.
Oh yeah, well, I have mad respect for people like yourself and everyone who does these live shows, because I think that's the benefit I have, is I can kind of you have some late nights, right? But I can try to work around my schedule the best I can. Where if you have a locked in interview, or you got a scheduled interview, or you have a live show at a certain time, that's a lot of work, and you're doing it on the on the cue, off the live. It's a little you're just off the cuff doing everything. Obviously you have a plan in what you're going to talk about. You aren't just winging it. You guys have articles you talk about, but that's a whole nother realm of live being able to talk.
I assemble a show document before we go live every day, kind of like what Ryan does, with all of my sources and everything I kind of want to talk about in order. And then what I do is I open them up on a different tab. So I just basically tab between them. And then it's thinking about, I wanted to say that. And there are so many times, I almost feel like Burgundy, because if it's not there and in the tab, it's not getting in the show. You know, even if I was thinking about it on the way beforehand, and I have a graphic that it happened Sunday night, that there was a Leonard Peltier picture of him on a motorcycle. And I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely want to show that, to show him free. Never made it on the show because I didn't have it in my lineup of tabs in the document. And again, it's also working with a teammate, which you have been a single sole aggregator for a long time. So you don't have to necessarily rely on waiting on somebody else or dealing with their schedule, or, you know, Reef has lost power and I have had to either do the show alone or come up with a co-host or whatever that is a couple of times. I also, there's something to be said for doing shows by yourself and just having total control of creative. And I love the funny stuff that you do, between mixing in music, making some of your own comedy, putting in some of the Danny Polishchuk comedy and other stuff. Yeah. Like it's not just about news and informing, but about entertaining. And that's where I kind of fall down, I think, a little bit. Sort of. I mean, look, I do a Jesse show, and we do a react show, you know, the stupid pet tricks, basically. Yeah, but a lot of the news stuff, it's very heavy, and there's no mix of levity in there. I think Steve does a really good job of bringing comedy into the heavy topic stuff.
Yeah. Well, you guys have some good rips too with you and Reef. You know, when you gotta, kind of give a conclusion at the end where you just like, because it is almost, like some of it is just so like, is this real? You know, like how dumb this is, or how insane or asinine everything is. You're just like, really? You know, so I get it. You can only be so comical sometimes, but I think you guys do a great job too.
Well, thank you, man. It's, again, it's a labor of love, and I think that in a similar way, like, you want more people to unplug from corporate media and to pay attention to the people that are doing this with only the incentive to get it right and inform their audience, versus do it on behalf of sponsors and advertisers. And
exactly.
I talked to 7C's a couple of weeks ago, and I love the pledge that he made recently over on Twitter, which is that he will never take a sponsor. He will never do that on behalf of a sponsor or advertiser, because because he feels like at some point it will come to a head and they'll either have a problem with it, and he'll either have to alter his content to make them happy, or self-censor, or they'll just straight up abandon him, and then he's got to figure out a source of revenue where he can't necessarily do the show he wants to do.
Exactly.
I feel like you're doing that in much the same way, as are we, value for value system. Right. And a lot of the value sometimes is in providing support, and not just financial. Like Steve talks about time, talent, and treasure. It's that time and talent. That's where I put a lot of my value that I try to give back, because I have the time, and because I have the skill to be able to put some of this stuff together. That's where I feel like I can make the difference. And it's hard, because you want to do a bunch of different things. And finding the lane that works for you and sticking to it. That's a commitment too. And I tend to want to ADD my way through it. And it's like, I want to do interview shows, and I want to do react shows. And the problem with that is YouTube doesn't know what to do with it. The algorithms don't know what to do with it. The people watching sometimes don't know what to do with it. Describe me. I say to people, they're just like, because it's, I'm producing, I'm hosting, I'm streaming, I'm editing, and the graphics. There's so much to what we do in independent media. How do you?
Oh man, I mean, just the work with your overlays. Oh yeah, there's so much on the behind, but even like, just something as simple as like what you have now, your overlays and your ticker and things like that are put into it. Like those are, that's obviously you kind of have a set template now, but those are things that a lot of people have put in the work. It makes it look way more professional. It's not just some Joe Schmo, in his basement. It's a legit like news organization you guys got. I mean, an actual real news, and one of the other reasons it made me think of why, when I was talking to Scott Armstrong back in the day, of kind of why I wanted to do those compilations was at the time, and it still happens because my very first show, I knew it was going to happen with YouTube because I knew who I was putting on. At mid upload, they struck it down. As my number one show, my first show. Oddly enough, it was funny because it was January 6th. I think I did it just to be funny, but it was it was Peter McCullough and Ryan Christian.
Oh, sure.
Review. So I knew it was like opening clip. Just like I was like, let's see how this goes, and it was obviously. But getting back, sorry, I kind of diverted there on my point. Was what I really wanted was to save these clips and archive them because so much of it's either censored or taken off, and then I don't have it and I can't share it with my kids. I mean, they're still young. At least I got my my 5-year-old knows if he gets at someone else's house, if we don't do like mainstream news at our house or any of that TV, so he just calls it propaganda. So if I get my 4 and 5-year-old to say that's propaganda, I was like, awesome, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Like, oh, I love it. I got to get my kids doing that.
It's like, that's not news, that's propaganda. So it's good, stuff like that, to be able to archive it, keep it, even if it was just for me and sharing with my kids, that's good, so they can know, because I still have them in the public school system, and it's hard with my wife work and I work, and so we just got to unschool them. Luckily, nothing's been crazy yet. They're still pretty young. I got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, so it's still got some. We still try to do as much of. There's nothing too crazy yet, but I know it's coming, so it's it's a good way to keep them informed, myself informed. Yeah, and I don't have my skill set isn't a journalist or writing, and the amount of devotion these people do on research on these topics. So if I can help by giving any of them and yourself like credit and just get them out there so that more people can see and not be so blindsided by the two-party duopoly and illusion, that'd be great. That's kind of my other, side of it.
Yeah, it's fighting that corporate news and corporate algorithm, and it's putting up even just a little bit of content because they're fire hosing us with corporate media. All right. They've created a brand new network in the last couple of years called News Nation. Nexstar created it. To me, that's CNN 2.0. So they've literally started hiring all the old CNN people, and they're kind of rebuilding it there with a slightly different, more corporate newsy, professionally feel. I'm not a fan of that channel. It's also affiliated with The Hill Rising. All right. And that has now started to creep its way into some things. Not a fan of that show, never was. And that is one of the vehicles. Now, that's where I get conflicted, is when it comes to going on these corporate media shows and giving them the credibility of independent media. It's a fight that I've been having with a lot of independent personalities, to be honest with you. Yeah. And I feel like I'm losing. All right, because they go for the visibility, they go for the eyeballs. Piers Morgan is one, the Talk or whatever, Talk TV, or his show is one of the ones that I think is one of the perpetrators of independent media going on a corporate media friendly show. They say that, we're they at least invite us on. Yeah. Right. And then they frame you as the crazy person, as the person with the ideas that are shunned upon. All right. And they only give you a very small amount of airtime in the end. They cut you off and they misconstrue your point. And then they cut to their next Zionist person. And it's like, how much value did you really have in going on shows like that by lending them the credibility that your audience, the independent audience that doesn't want to work or watch these people, well, shit, if they're going there, maybe there's a reason why I should watch them. And I think that's what happens more often.
Yep.
Now, there was someone I saw recently. It was like, I wasn't really into this person before, but now that I saw this, well, and it's like, that's the exact opposite effect that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get people to unplug from these channels, not discover new people within them. And that is definitely a big source of frustration and argument with me. And what I find is that a lot of the career podcasters tend to want to lean towards those networks because even like a day or a couple of weeks of amplification can help set them up. So the attraction to go for something like that is huge. You know, even a Joe Rogan appearance. You know, everybody's been screaming to have Whitney go on Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm conflicted on that. You know,
Right.
I get Rogan, he's a big platform, and he'll let her talk. All right. But a lot of people, I think, will misinterpret or use that conversation to kind of twist that what she's doing to their benefit, where it's a lot harder to do that when she goes on some of the other shows that she goes on.
Yeah. It's kind of like when you saw it was a longer format at least, and it wasn't as bad as Piers Morgan, but when even Corbett went on Dr. Drew, I was like, oh geez, he's on Dr. Drew. I was like, well, hopefully someone they don't clip it weird, and hopefully that someone that's a Dr. Drew fan can now, on the positive, hopefully they go to James Corbett's site and ignore Dr. Drew. But yeah, you're probably right. Most of them are probably just. And
it's funny, Corbett's been making the rounds. We talked earlier about writing a book, and he just published a new book. And guess what? Lo and behold, all of a sudden, now he's getting invited on shows that really didn't previously invite him on. So is the answer to independent media personalities, find a topic of expertise, write a book on it. It then becomes your introduction or a reason for people to invite you on their show as a guest. You have conversations with them. They realize you've got knowledge and skills on other topics, and you become a guest on that show, a regular guest. I've seen that happen as a formula pretty often. I think it works pretty well. It's just a matter of what do you write about, and getting that time to publish it out. I've had a few ideas of what I might think about doing. I don't know. I don't know if writing a book is for me. I don't know if I have the commitment, the daily grind. I like a weekly thing. Like that is a long-term investment of time. I'm more instant gratification. I like to have daily clips and weekly stuff to put out and updates and things. Doing that in addition to publishing and writing a book, I don't know if I could really do them both. Like that just, I got to talk to Charlie Robinson. I know he's famous for doing that. He's got macroaggressions and he does union, and he's in the working world too, and taking care of some family. And he's published, I think, 7 or 8 books already. It's like he's always working on a book in addition to everything. So it's like, I kind of want to learn from guys that do that. How do you budget your time to additionally incorporate something like that with the research that's required? Holy shit. It's pretty wild.
It is. I mean, even my grandpa, who's not a author by any means, he's not a writer. He just wanted to write a book about his experience. It was me not knowing. You don't ask a lot of veterans what happened in the war when I was little. They used to live next to us. You didn't know. I was a little kid, and I was like, "Hey, Grandpa, what happened?" He would never talk about it because he was a prisoner of war. He was in the Philippines in the Death March, and he was in the prison camps over there for about 3.5 years, and saw the bomb and everything, and then was down to 75 pounds. There was a lot of crazy stories, but just stuff he experienced, and I know it was hard for him to work through that. It was like therapy for him, and he's not a professional writer, but that took him a long time, to put that together and get the right, format and get it in the right structure. And that's, visual memories versus, someone doing so much research, a different type of research book, right? And having the source material, it's just totally different aspect. And I could imagine the time consumption on that, especially when you're doing, like you said, you're doing all this other stuff. Yeah. How does he do that?
It's amazing. He's got some budgeting of time skills that I think a lot of us could benefit from. I know I could, and I still am pretty organized. What I realize is making lists helps me a lot. Like yesterday, I had a lot. This week I added a bonus show because it had been 3 weeks for How Do We Miss That? So I did an extra set of stories, which meant an extra set of clips. And that was an extra day of rendering and making smaller versions and thumbnails. For me, when I'm making all these clips, every clip needs a thumbnail. And then I'll get into a situation where I'll need to make 8, 10, 12 thumbnails at a time. It's just like going in bulk. And it doesn't take that long, but you have to be in the right frame of mind in order to make them look good. You know, and that's also part of it is you have to kind of be feeling it at times. And part of the grind is doing it when you're not feeling it. And you know, the commitment to doing this that a lot of people don't have. You know, I read somewhere that like 90% of podcasts don't make it past the 5th episode. And you think about like what we're doing now, and we're hundreds now of episodes into something. We just decided to start doing it, you know,
right.
And to everyone out there that is thinking about it, I encourage you, start, try it. Like, you're going to have bad weeks. You're going to have audio fuck ups. You're going to have lost shows. It all happens to all of us. Learn the tools, and you develop skills that then can be applied in totally different ways that you never even thought to apply them in real life, you know, outside of this independent media space, in business, in work, for example, especially. I found that, you know, marketing for my own business, I can kind of take, I came from marketing, which gave me kind of this omni-channel presence type of mindset, which I came in with. And how do you market consistently across different platforms? That came from marketing my own small business when I was a consultant, having to manage a social media presence and everything, and then taking that and translating what we're doing here back to live streaming. I actually did a live stream once of a product demo with the owner of a company, a live stream interview. And I had,
that's cool.
Yeah. And some other channel, like, kind of wanted to pick it up and promote it. It didn't really do, it's just trying different things. The canvas skills, you know, the graphic design skills and the things that I can put together, and making little intros. Like Fiorella came to me and she was starting her new channel about 2 years ago and said, hey, you know, would you want to help me put something together? And I, you know, sourced the whole thing. I came up with the concept and brought the different clips in, and that creative process was a lot of fun for me, and trying different things. And I got paid. It was $100 or what. I didn't make a lot of money, but I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the skill and for my friend and to help out. But it was nice to get a little bit of money too. There is, you know, you can make money working for and engineering for and doing graphics for independent shows. You're not going to get rich. I get that.
Right.
But there is a need out there. My friend Oz from Beauty and the Boomer, I know he was getting paid like $50 a stream to engineer. So that's, if you don't want to press the buttons and change the screens and manage the chat, etc., you hire a third-party person to come in and run that for you. And, you know, there's a balance and a dance that you work together. And they change the screens and they give it a more of a professional shot so that you can focus more on your guest and making it a better show. You know, when we put together a team for Tara Reid, she had come to us early on in INN land. She had been one of the original founders that I had gone to her and said, look, you're one of the 16 that I think we could all help each other. And then she was doing a podcast with RT, and that ended right after the sanctions and the stuff happened with Ukraine. So RT then gets cut off. They're sanctioned. Her podcast does not get renewed. And she then says, well, what do I do? Like, I want to continue to do this. So we had to figure out, okay, how do we build something around her? Because she did not have the skills to engineer her own thing and do her own thumbnails and everything. She could do the interviews and she could bring the guest and maybe record it on Zoom. So we had, first it was Oz, and then Reef took over as an engineer, and he'd run the buttons and schedule the time, and I'd kind of coordinate the thing as a producer to say, okay, here's who the guest is going to be. We'll write a bio, a description. We're going to make sure that we have a thumbnail done. We had an art art person working on nice cartoony thumbnails, and we put a team together. And I think that was a formula. Now, that was a bit on the extreme side. Now, a podcast that makes money, you can certainly afford to do that. But I think like a 3-person team potentially to run a show between a producer, an engineer, and an art person, I think there's like a winning for maybe a marketing person. That's what the producer also needs to do is marketing, uploading, maybe even some short clips, publishing to a Substack or wherever. I think like a 3-person team can really accomplish a tremendous amount when it comes to building out a show, a channel, a live something. We're doing it shoestring to one person at a time now. And it's a challenge, man. It's a real grind. It's kind of what I see. And I've actually been talking with a couple of people about kind of what do I want to see INN develop into. And I'm thinking more like as an independent production company so that people learn skills here and then they end up being hired out by shows or whatever and get paid for the skills that they've learned. We can provide resources to help train and support independent creators. So they then use those skills to learn production, editing, thumbnails, marketing, SEO. But in return, we get their labor and their, the shows to put on the network, collaborations. And then hopefully, we'll get a paid gig, which then maybe a small commission or something comes back to the network.
I think that's a great idea because people always need to get their feet wet. They're always looking for a spot with no experience or trying to get into those fields, whether it is just editing or marketing or production, or engineering. And then that way they have a stepping stone. They get the experience with you, and then if they need to go to a higher paid gig, you gave them all that help and experience to get them to that next level.
And then also I didn't even talk about website, and again, looking at the fact that we can expect to be censored, what's the next step beyond platforms? And that's been my kind of thought process for about a year now, a year and a half. We've got to make sure that we have our own self-hosted website that's run on an open source platform. WordPress is opensource.org. There are a couple of others where you could literally just code it, host it on your own server, and nobody's taking that down.
Exactly.
Same thing when it comes to live streaming. It's why I believe in multi-streaming to different platforms. I think you've got a good mix between Twitter, and you publish your reviews to Substack, but also you're on Rumble and Odyssey, so you're on the video platforms. I see you're on YouTube, but I know they're tough. Especially with the material and the people that you cover, right?
Yeah, I don't play the dance as far as polling anything, but it's more the I'll get a couple shows up, they give me a strike, I'm banned for a few weeks or months, and then I'll do it again. And then they never officially kick me off, but so that's why there's lulls. The only thing I can keep doing on there, which is a fun side project, is the wrestling, and that's pretty fun.
Oh, dude, I love. We haven't seen an IMA in a while, but I know you said you're crunched for time, and
we are in the works. TNP, the New Prisoners podcast, great guy, the number 6.
Love them.
He comes up with a lot of storyboards and character ideas for another season 2, and then him and Steve will get some kind of way and do a great commentary. And but the problem I have now is, luckily with kids, I do have a gaming system they'll play, but the way I'm just used to older, video games where you can just have the same game, right? And continue to record it. Well, now because everything's digital, I can't upload new characters and make new people unless I buy the new game. So I'm like, dang it. So I was like, okay, I got to wait for I think the new game just came out. So I'm going to wait till it goes on sale and then I'll get it. And then we can start. I have a whole list of what he wants to do, and then we'll get back into the groove. I think probably within the next month or so, because that is fun. It's just hilarious to watch, whether there's commentary or not. It's anytime.
Will they let you bring in your old characters once you have the new one?
Yes.
Okay, so at least you can bring in the old ones and make new ones. That's not terrible.
Yeah.
I was so honored when I saw an INN character in there with the masked man. I was like, oh, that's fucking perfect. But yeah, I grew up. Fun. I was a WWE fanatic, and we now live in the WWE country.
Right.
So I feel like this is the time for that. 100%. Like the new administration. Oh my God, there's just miles of material there.
Oh, it's so good.
Like, Pete Hegseth with all the tattoos on him. You'll be able to have a Pete Hegseth character if he's even still Secretary of Defense by the time you get to it. Right?
Oh, it's so good. I know. Yeah. I think even Steve, because he's talks to Whitney quite a bit, and he said he sent her one of the clips I made, but it was without context at first. He forgot. She was like, what the hell is this? But then he gave her context. She's like, okay, I get it. But I think it was like her versus Victoria Newland, which was classic.
Oh, that's amazing. That was dude. Yeah, it's very much in the vein of celebrity deathmatch and
100%.
Wrestling.
Yep.
So it's like, if you come from that MTV era and you watched all those, it just fits that wheelhouse. It's funny and it's entertaining, and it's old video game wrestling stuff at the same time. It's a great mix of a couple of hours worth just to cut loose. And I hate watching anything that isn't normally news related or and even sports related. Like they've destroyed sports, man. Yeah. They ruined pro sports. I grew up, ESPN was the soundtrack to my teens, 20s, and 30s.
Yes.
And then I got married, and then I started to see it when I listened to Mike and Mike in the Morning, which isn't even a great radio show by any stretch. But then all of a sudden they started bringing a woman on to the show, like Mike and so-and-so. And it was like, they were forcing the DEI thing down our throats to the point where there had to then be a woman on every broadcast, and I'm not a sexist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do want like experts in the field talking about it. Yeah. There were some great female commentators, but it almost felt like they were forcing it where it wasn't necessarily a natural thing. And a lot of women doing the commentary on men's sports. I get it. I get that they wanted to bring women in,
and you can tell when it's not authentic. It's definitely forced, and it just doesn't seem authentic like it used to be. I'm 100% with it. Yeah, that was my whole. If I was obsessed with any kind of wasn't mainstream news or anything like that, it was it was sports growing up, just playing and watching, and then doing it in college, and it was up until probably the whole Whitney exposure. I've watched so much less sports than I ever had. I used to do season tickets with basketball. We only have one pro sports team here, but football, baseball, basketball. The only sport I can watch now, because it is still fairly genuine, is international rugby. And that's like one of the last things I can kind of watch. Usually just like the Six Nations in the winter time and like the World Cup. And that's about it. It's I'd rather just watch my kids play at this point.
Yeah, I do. I watch MMA with Reeve. Got me into watching MMA several years ago. So we try to watch UFC on Saturday nights. That's a kind of a way to cut loose. But usually I'm working and I'm doing like editing or something, sharing news or preparing for Sunday's show. While that's on, it's background noise. And all of a sudden it's and you watch someone just punch someone out and or do a crazy submission move, and that really has become. It's interesting to see the overlap between the UFC and Trump and that whole administration, and how Trump has an entourage now that shows up at basically at a lot of the events, and it's become politicized to a point where some of the fighters will even jump over and try to go shake his hand and what. It's been interesting. Dana White, of course, now on the board of Facebook, and them selling out to the Saudis and this mega conglomerate corporation that bought WWE and bought the UFC. And now I think they even have a piece of Dana White's new brain-altering slap fight series, right? But it's of course, they have the Live Golf as well. So it's different for who the owners are. I think that a lot of pro sports has been, the money really ruined it. I mean, it got to the point where it's just silly. You know, Colin's talking about they're talking about building a new RFK stadium in downtown DC. Colin lives in DC. He's going to do a spot on it tonight, I believe. They're going to talk about it. And the amount of public money that's going to have to go in, and it's going to be built with private financing, but still they've got to alter the streets, and they have to, you're still going to talk about putting a couple of $100 million into the city to be able to make that work. And they're already struggling on a budget. And unlike states, DC is completely dependent on federal dollars, and they don't have a way to raise their own state taxes, etc. There's city taxes, but most of the people who live there are poor. And he's freaking out that all of these money and resources that they're looking at, you know, a shortfall of $1 billion or some stupid number thanks to Trump, you know, and they were talking about cutting teachers, and I don't even know where that ended up, because they went on recess and they were supposed to vote something in. They probably kicked the can down the road, but a lot of these services are getting cut. And it's like, you know, to support pro sports, bread and circuses, man. It's funny, you know,
100%.
they talk about the distractions of bread and circuses, and really pro sports and entertainment. Look at what we've learned about the entertainment industry thanks to Whitney. You know, that also, by the way, that compromised people. The whole thing that we know that things don't get elevated unless you know that you can control it and take it down at any one point. And then it's, well, 100%. What did they do in order to get controlled so that they can then be elevated? It's, you know, it's almost like hazing at a fraternity in a way, but then they've got blackmail material on you forever. So,
yes,
you know, I think I've called this out, that you saw a lot during the 2024 election cycle. All of those celebrities that came out on behalf of Harris, you could tell why. They were threatened. They weren't even paid off.
Yeah.
I mean, they were paid off just as a penance, but they were clearly threatened that they didn't want to be there. I mean, remember the Beyonce one in Atlanta? They advertised it as a Beyonce concert, and then Harris came out and spoke. And Beyonce never performed, I believe. And the whole crowd went fucking crazy. Like, they pulled all kinds of shit on these compromised people.
It's wild.
And then once you start seeing how everything around you is compromised like that, it's like, how do you believe anything and see it as genuine? You know, I go through this with Jesse. Jesse wrote a song called Red Pill years ago about, you know, seeing propaganda in even like a Toyota Camry commercial, you know, and on TV sitcoms. And man, it's a crazy world out there, and bringing kids in, you know, that's another thing I wanted to touch on, because you've got young kids, as did I. I spent a lot of time in my 20s and 30s as a single person. I wasn't married, and I didn't meet my wife till I was later. And I had pretty much resigned myself to the fact that I wasn't going to get married or have kids. And then, of course, the minute that happens, you meet someone and everything goes out the window. But
same here.
For years, I said, you know, this world is going to be so fucked up, and it's getting worse. How do we think about, is it even selfish to think about bringing kids into this world? And then you see all your friends doing it, and you see the world as it is, and you're like, well, if it's going to get any better, maybe I can contribute and put someone in there that's going to be a little bit better 20, 30, 40 years from now, maybe. Yeah. Like that is part of the rationale, but I'll be honest, it was a little on the selfish side too. It was seeing some of the people as I got older, the people that I worked with outside as they got older and didn't have family around them and didn't have people to care about them, care for them as they got sick, for example. And we see a lot of that. And I'm like, shit, man, who's going to visit me in the retirement home? You know? And that was honestly part of the motivation. And I'll, you know, as honest as I can be out there about all of this, you know, that's having a legacy and someone to care after you're gone was definitely part of the thought process behind, you know, how do I justify, after all I've said and thought about this for so long, going forward with it? You know?
Right.
And,
oh, I get that. Like, it's, and I mean, yeah, I get the, admittedly, you want to say it's selfish, but I think most people would say that no one really wants to just be old and alone. You know what I mean? It's kind of fun to have that, your connection like you had with your parents or grandparents, if people are fortunate enough to have that. It's a fun thing to have. And, I was the same way, like middle, middle 20s, I didn't think that would ever happen. And I had, my wife's younger than me, but it was later, not until probably I was closer to 30 till we had kids. And yeah, now I'm like, man, I should have started earlier. Like had more, I'm embracing the chaos and, seeing, if you can help raise those, generations, to be a little more aware, a little more independent, and not so inundated. They're going to have inundation with, they're not going to avoid everything. Right. So,
well, it's the technocracy that we see. And again, with what we've been learning about, especially, it's, I kind of then say, what kind of world did we are we setting up for these kids with, do they have, CBDCs and, the way that they've been locking stuff down, we see how the control grid, as Catherine Austin Fitts has referred to it, and everyone else, how do we educate that? I think that a lot of the solutions that Derek and Ryan and others, Corbett, have proposed are really going to be important. So again, that's why I bring it back to the independent review and what you do in, like you said, they're trying to memory hole a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to COVID, especially when it comes to January 6th, especially when it comes to the Epstein stuff and Julian Assange. All right. Oh, yeah. And that was where I first, by the way, you mentioned Taylor Hudak. I actually first met Taylor because we were all organizing over Assange. She had done something somewhere and she asked if I could make a graphic for her. I was very early on. I made a terrible one. It was honestly really bad. She ended up going with somebody else to make her thumbnail. It was that bad, but it was at least an introduction. I tried and they could, that was, she's great. She was working with Activism Munich then.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, that was like 2020, 2021's, but it's really important to document this stuff. It's really important to not have it be memory hold and to place it into multiple locations. I really hadn't thought about the angle, like you said, of at least having something to show my kids about what was I doing during this period. I've kept my kids from INN completely, really, like from even they know about it because they see it all over my screens. And they've never watched anything other than listening to Jesse Jett do a Dr. Seuss reading. Because this is very heavy shit that we're dealing with. And it's like, when do you start introducing? I love that you got your kid to say propaganda for corporate media. We didn't even turn like the corporate news on ever in this house. Like those channels don't exist.
Yeah, it's not allowed.
I bought, like, I have cable service, but I only got the box because they made me, and I told them I'm not paying for any channels. They give me the over-the-air channels of 2 through 13 on the box, nothing else. And I don't pay them for the box every month, which is the thing. They charge like $10 a month to have a cable box in your house that you don't even want. Yeah, get out of here. So I was like, all right, I'm not paying for your thing, and I'm not, I won't buy any channels, but all I really want is the internet. But they're like, yeah, but the internet TV package is cheaper than just the internet. Like, all right, fine.
It's ridiculous.
Fine. It really is ridiculous how they've managed to do that. But I guess they're getting some subsidy somewhere from someone that makes it cheaper, so they've packaging it out. But we don't put the kids. All they watch is YouTube and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus. I'm trying to weed them off the Disney Plus, but they are indoctrinated with Disney. All right. It started out with, the Disney fairy tales and the princess stuff. And then it moves to the sitcoms. And right now they're big into Hannah Montana, and The Descendants is the big one.
Okay.
The Descendants are little shits, by the way. They're disrespectful. Now, the one thing is that I do like that it shows that there's a balance in everyone, and there's good and bad, and you can, you know, they're good people, but they can do fucked up things. And I think that's an important, but it's just all they do are fucked up things, you know? and some of the stuff that comes out of their mouths, I then hear repeated directly coming out of my children's mouths, either at me or at each other. And I don't know, how do you fight that kind of indoctrination?
It's tough, man.
It's getting tougher as they get older. Trust me.
Yeah.
You know, my girls are almost 10. You know, they're now watching YouTube shorts, the dumbest shit ever. You know, my son loves watching Lego stuff, and he's got this Australian lady that she builds Lego stuff. And luckily it's not political, but there's definitely a way for people to get to my kids without me being there all the time, and influence the way they speak, the way they think, and a lot more than I can. And that scares the shit out of me. And it's partly why I do what I do, but it's not kids programming. So are we missing out somehow by not trying to create some kind of programming that's designed for a younger audience to educate them about propaganda? Maybe that's a step, a direction, and a lane that we need to start looking at. But will corporate media just do everything to fucking fight us and scream their heads off? And, you know, like, I can only imagine the fight and the way that you're trying to groom children, and the kind of crap that they would spin about how you would do something like that in order to warn off the next generation about how controlled everything they see and hear really is.
I like where you're going, though. Like, the idea of that is not terrible, because, you know, even just, let's say it is an innocent YouTube shorts, right? Or if they're on TikTok, same exact stuff, right? It's that very short attention span clips that just get your brain going. And you can, I mean, I've been succumbed to that sometimes on YouTube when I'm just trying to unwind, and it's like, how did I just swipe through 20 videos?
Instagram Reels, they do it too.
Oh
now TikTok, you know,
it's thing, right? If you could do that too, because they do make a lot, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but through a lot of these channels I've seen, there's a handful of people that'll make kids books, right, that are more geared towards independent thinking, or, you know, just away from the mainstream, and to question things and to know your rights and things like that. That's like, you know, that's not a bad way, you know, to get these kids to actually be critical thinkers and not just zombies. But the video aspect, you know, if that's what is in and that's what's clicking them and that's what all the kids are watching, because my kids are, even YouTube's a tough one. I'm luckier on Disney's really just Bluey right now still, luckily.
Bluey's great. Bluey makes me feel inferior as a parent. I think that's what it's designed to do.
I can't do all that.
And then you realize that both the kids are girls. Like, it took me 2 years to realize that the kids were girls. I thought they were both boys.
Well, I at least thought Bluey was at first. I was like, wait, what?
Right?
Like, it was. But I've been kind of I've been probably bad at inundating them with like old stuff I used to watch instead, so they get stuck with older. Like my kids, both of them. My daughter finally grew out of it, but I was like, I got them to start off with just all my Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters and, you know, those types of things, and Goonies movies, and, you know, 90s, late 80s, mid to late 90s movies that are, you know, somewhat appropriate. I mean, my kids know it's probably not great at their age, but they can definitely do verbatim, you know, a Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but, you know, things like that.
You know,
my
Angela,
daughter just yelled, "Thank you very much, Miss Lippy," to somebody yesterday, and it made me a little proud and a little.
That makes my heart warm. Yes. See, my kids are not really. I haven't really brought them into all of that stuff yet. You know, it's getting there. But then it's also that they're old enough to now think Dad's lame, and if Daddy likes it, then it must not be that cool. So it's like I have to be careful about how I introduce it, because I don't want to turn them off to the cool stuff and have them think that because I like it, it sucks. You know?
Right.
And it's even finding stuff to watch together on movie night. Shrek was a good one. The kids like Shrek. Something that really brings in generations together. But we don't really see anything like that on the independent side for families.
No, and that would be pretty cool if someone could do something like that. I mean, the closest thing it's a back project I've been pushing off for well over a year right now, and it's not necessarily geared towards kids, it was more towards parents and I would say kids in maybe middle school, but I was thinking more high school age of and I know I'd, like, discuss it with you, and it's still a back project I'm working on, and I do have clips from a lot of different people, at the time, I titled it Operation White Pill, and it was just what I was doing was had, like, a set of 6 questions and just having independent media members like yourself that are whether they have kids or not, they
Oh,
know
right.
how the propaganda works and everything, and the questions were more geared to, like, well, how would you explain this to a parent that's trying to teach kids or just from that perspective, or how would you explain this to a teenager? And granted, some of them are so broad stroked. Like I remember, what's wrong with the school system? It's like you could spend 5 hours talking about that, right? Um, and I have I have a lot of good clips from people. I'm still working on getting a few more, and it's just been one of those I keep pushing back, and I feel bad. And I'm eventually gonna just have to sit down and put it all together. But I mean, my very first guy I reached out was Corbett. And this is like I might have been in, I don't know, into 5 episodes or something like that, and he wrote me back within, less than an hour
He's
and just
great.
say, "Give me a time and place, I'll do it." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "This guy doesn't even know who I am. He could think I'm some psycho, he doesn't know my show or anything." And I thought that was pretty crazy that and kinda humbling that he would do that kinda stuff. I thought that was pretty cool. So I feel bad for everyone that has recorded their stuff. I haven't gotten it yet because I have a lot of good people, but yeah, that's not towards kids, it's more parents and a little more adolescent and high school age. Whereas if you could really reach the younger generation, have parents get together to watch it like that, that would be huge. Even if it is something innocent, like you said, on a short that, maybe it is like Legos or something, but the way you direct it and the way you talk, to help maybe critical thinking or to get them away from that zombie-esque, mindless thinking,
You
that would
know,
be
I
kind of
would
cool.
I would also say, my wife has been kind of on me a little bit. I wouldn't say on me, but she's critical of the fact that most of the people in our space are single, or
Oh,
not necessarily family
mhm.
oriented, and it's a challenge as far as time budgeting wise. When I put the kind of time in that I do, she a lot of the pushback I get from her is, well, not all these people have families that they commit to with time. And I'm like, well, that's not really true. A lot of Misty is a mom and Steve is a
Mhm.
dad and they have
Yeah.
households. There are people that do this and have balance. There are a lot of people that don't have balance and they can dedicate all their time to it. Um, Finding that balance, you mentioned that you unplug on the weekends. I wish I
Mhm.
could do that more, but I'm
Yeah, I hear
addicted.
you.
I'll be the first to admit I'm addicted to knowing what's going on, to staying informed,
Mhm.
and to being a part of this community that I'm a member of. And I don't, I like, I've got FOMO, basically.
I I don't blame you. I got to a point where, I know a lot of people in this will get burnout, right? And whether they're posting stuff or making shows or not, but just, this, like you said, this stuff is heavy when you're really listening to it, or if you're just someone who absorbs it all the time, right? And when I first, you start getting down some wild stuff with Whitney's, and especially when you get into the Franklin scandal and all this stuff she's talking about with kids and recently having kids at the time, I was like, oh God, I don't even want to be a part of any of this. I was just like, I'm done with social media. I'm done with everything. And then once I started getting more into these shows, I was like, you know what? You can find a balance, and it's good to be informed. You know what I mean? By these people. I don't want to totally exile myself from this and then just be succumb to just propaganda when it hits me and not really know. It's good to know what's coming. I mean, I'm glad I knew what Ryan was saying before 2020 really was 2020. Those kind of things help, um, and I think it can help you too not get sucked into this every 4-year cycle of tricking people, and somehow everyone has a short memory and forgets what they said 4 years ago and flips their side again.
Well, and getting into
It's good to
the
be informed.
duopoly team sports. That's
Yes, it's exactly
getting
it.
people to unplug from that duopoly team sports mindset is,
Mhm.
how many times it's, well, if you're against the Democrats, you must be a Trumper. No, we're
Yes.
we're, we're not at all. We think there's a different way, and it's not doing a third party, and it's not through federal electoral politics as it exists right now, because of the way that the entire system has been bought. I think right now more than ever, we're dealing with the challenge of being accused of being anti-Semitic, quote unquote, which then gets you canceled in a lot of ways. Of course, that carries a lot of other hate speech type of punishments and penalties that scare the shit out of me. That this is what they've been doing, and this is what Whitney and Ryan, all of them have been warning about for a long time, is this control grid and the censorship clamping down. And it's not even happening here in the United States nearly as much as it's happening in other regions around the world. I mean, look at what's happening in Europe.
It's insane.
And my worry is that's going to come for the independent creators here. And then as Jesse Jett likes to say, the last voice silenced could be ours.
It's insane that you're so on point with the two-party just duopoly and the two-team sport thing that they just get people on it. If we could just get more people to awake from that, I love what T. Snyder puts together, with this conspiracy synergy and gets people on. That's a good, I guess I wouldn't say to kids, but it's funny, it's got a little humor to it. It's I was jokingly having a theory in my head of the other day of how many people I know, and I'm sure you get this because when you're in this world and you know how dumb this all is, right? And you expose it, you're gonna have people on the left call you, a MAGA guy, and then the people on the right are gonna call you a libtard, right?
Yep.
And you don't fit in anywhere, which I like that because I don't succumb to either of those idiots. But it blows my mind how quickly people forget and flip their stance. How many people I know that are I'm kind of in this weird area here in Oregon where most of Oregon is, I would say, pretty rural, but you have these little pockets, and the Portland area is very, extreme one side and the rest is extreme the other side. So I'm in that middle just outside of town where I get a lot of both. And it's kind of funny to see, people that I know watch MSNBC every day, and 4 or 5 years ago, they were so on board with Elon being the darling of the left and Tesla this and Tesla that. And now he's the Third Reich and he's a Nazi and all this. And I'm like, hey, we all hated Elon before anyone else, because he's a technocrat. It doesn't have to do with left, right, and then, and all of a sudden I got people on the right that all of a sudden like Tesla. And it's like, what? You were just like, what? No, like, stop. Like, what? Can we just, do you not remember what you said, just a few years ago? So my joking theory was, all the stuff they spray and put in our water and our food, maybe it's just enough to dumb you down, to erase your critical thinking, that you forget what you even thought about 4 years ago because you're so in depth with this two-party team sport crud. I don't know. I was just kind of joking.
Jesse again writes, frustrating. Jesse wrote, been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. And it really, that's the beginning of the grift. Last stand, and I came to deliver. So good. And Oregon really does have that mix where you've got like 3/4 of the state that wants to secede and merge with Iowa, with Idaho, and become like its own state, because they're so tired of the liberals running Portland into the ground. And I know you've got like a homelessness problem there. There's like a big drug problem there as far as heroin and addiction. But and this is what the liberals want. Well, it's not just a liberal problem, because it's also that the conservatives don't actually give the liberals what they want. So they have to deal with whatever they can get and make that work. And, that's what I talked to Keith McHenry. He was my first one-on-one that I did. And he's a legend. I love that guy. But he was talking about how all this money was coming into liberal California, and yet it wasn't helping the homeless people that it was designed to help, because it's duopoly. It doesn't matter whether it's the liberals or the conservatives. And then you've also got the Republicans and conservatives that are fighting to get their piece of it, the corruption that's got to get into the middle of it. And everything in Northern California is very corrupt because of Silicon Valley and all the money that's up there.
100%. Or like you said, with this free speech here, we had just a couple of years ago when, Joey B was there, and how much did the right complain about he's censoring this and censoring that? And now what are they doing? They're arresting people for protesting. They're doing the exact same thing. It's
They're deporting people for protesting.
Yeah, they're sending people out of country. It's insane. But it's okay because it's their side doing it, right? And that's just kind of how it is here. It's as long as it's our side doing it, it's okay. That's how ridiculous it is.
Well, that's why I prefer the independent side, because I can yell at all of them and be like, you're all being stupid. And
yes, and that's what I love.
There's not enough of us. There's not enough of us saying, this is all dumb. That we knew last May that Biden was probably going to drop out. Okay. Yep. We knew that Trump was probably going to win. We did not think for a million years that they were going to literally anoint Harris without ever having even a vote at anything. It was literally just, okay, she's the candidate now. And everyone just accepted it. I still cannot get my head around this, that every former governor that could have potentially run for president, knowing that she was a vapid moron, stayed silent. And this is their penance now. We all are suffering. And again, I didn't think that there was any Democrat that could have potentially stepped up and beaten Trump, but they didn't even try. They literally just gave the game away. And then now they're still browbeating the quote unquote left, the independents. Dude, even if every person that voted for any third party voted for Harris and not Trump, he still would have won. Like, you can't blame anybody but the Democrats for being as corrupt and as poor on message as they were for losing. And I wish both parties could lose. I wish they could all lose, and I've been none of the above. I still feel like if they can't even get a quorum, how can they legitimately govern? So just don't show up at the federal level, and that's been my thing. They've got to fix Citizens United. We've got to get the money out of buying our elections. And until that happens, we're going to be propagandized with C students that will toe the line. I think also Trump and the WWE presidency has literally ripped the cover off the fact that they just want people who look the part, even if they can't act the part. Pam Bondi is a perfect example of that. She has been corrupt as fuck. She's not a good lawyer. She's never been a good lawyer. She's been a partisan soldier who has used the law to attack enemies of her own party. She got her start by absolving Trump of his Trump University lawsuit in Florida after taking a $25,000 donation. She worked cheap on top of it. There's also been a lot of rumors and conversation about how embedded she's been with Scientology, but that she's not a Scientologist. And that's very important because Scientology does not want the politicians that they align with to be Scientologists. It's a specific strategy. All right. And it's a fascinating thing that I've looked into. Why? Because people think that Scientology is a cult. So if they have somebody outside of it, it A, lends legitimacy to them, and then B, also removes the potential for people to look upon them with side eye to say, well, they're just representing Scientology. Well, technically not. And that's where they've played this game. And, they hold billions in real estate. The whole reason why they got declared a religion, I don't know if you ever saw that Going Clear documentary on HBO they did years ago. It was great.
No, I'll have to check that out. It's
a cult. I mean, it's really fascinating. So they're led by a guy. It's real indoctrination, and they turn everybody against. They turn themselves against everyone that's not already in Scientology, and they'll have you turn on the rest of your family. If somebody in the family figures out that this thing is a cult, I don't want to be part of it anymore. These literally excommunicated from the family. This is what happened to Leah Remini. And then they have people that chase them around and follow them around and harass them and stalk them. It's really messed up with the way that they've controlled. And it's got billions of dollars at its disposal to make this all happen too. Frightening shit.
Yeah. I've seen a couple undercover videos they did. One in, I think it was in the UK, and then a couple in California and Florida. And it was pretty interesting how they, suck people in, just bringing people in with their interviews and the way they get their money. It's crazy.
Half of Clearwater, Florida is owned by the Church of Scientology, and they've got, private security and buildings and their own police force. Crazy shit.
Yeah, I drove by that once.
A lot of similarities, honestly, to like Trumpism and the way that people have bought into the cult of Trumpism. There was a funny graphic I saw this morning that basically it's like they're tunnel visioning on MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Forget about the fact that he's got the Israel-controlled cabinet or that he's suspending habeas corpus to detain migrants for as long as he wants without trial, or the whole introduction of the billionaires in his cabinet, or Lutnick with the CBDCs and Tether, or the shitcoin $ Trump meme coin that they introduced 2 days before inauguration, where he pulled in billions of dollars, or Truth Social. Like, how is he still allowed to own a part of a social media platform as a president?
That's a great question.
How does he not have to divest from that shit? I mean, it's
right.
And nobody, MAGA, they can't see any of that because, well, Joe Biden and Tony Bobolini and Hunter Biden and Burisma, they're all corrupt. Yes, they all need to go to jail. Yeah. I'm not arguing with what you're saying there, but call your guy out for his shit. Like, it starts with cleaning up your own house, and nobody wants to do that.
Nope. No one wants to admit fault. They just want to point on the other side when they do it, when they both do it at the same time. And just like you said, it's a joke.
They're kicking that can down the road. It's unreal.
I love the always hearing it. You had a good episode on Nature Boy. Excuse me.
Yes.
And it was a good interview for anyone. You should check it out with Indy. And I just love when he always calls him Orange Jesus. It cracks me up.
he does have,
but that's how they look at him, man. It's funny.
And they literally, like, the ones where they're putting their hands on him in the Oval Office, like oh
my god,
like, it's creepy.
It's the savior complex. It's weird. Weird.
And for years, all they want is a big is a savior. They want a strongman daddy savior. It's funny that they claim that they have such independence and they want freedom, but this guy has been taking away freedoms. They just want. Look, and I don't want to say that it's a racial or a white supremacist thing. It's more than that. It's about restoring the 1950s mindset to the United States. But the 1950s also had a lot of spousal abuse. The 1950s had a ton of racial problems. The 1950s had the Korean War. Right? It had the lead up to Vietnam. You had a lot of fucked up stuff happening in the 50s that has been nostalgia to indoctrinate and propagandize people into believing that it was so much better then because we had a baby boom. And by the way, that was built on a war economy. That was when Levittown was built and you had all these little houses come home, for the soldiers that were coming up. My grandparents lived in a Levittown home. When I was a kid growing up, we used to drive into Levittown, New York to go see my grandparents. And that was, on weekends, I spent quite a bit of time there. What now? It's just, the solutions watch. And I feel like we're being pushed so far out to the edges. It's how do we prepare our kids to deal with the mainstream, to deal with the public schools, to deal with the constant pull to join the herd that we've somehow managed to avoid because we are, they see us as on the fringe, I think, in a lot of ways.
It's tough. I don't think there's really there's no set perfect answer, but I think, if we keep on, at least with our own kids or people we know that can spread it to their kids of, promoting as much of this as we can to get the right channels out there the best we can. So people can be exposed to what's actually going on to try to help spread that. And then with our own kids, if we can promote critical thinking, independence, I know it's easier said than done because just raising your kid in general is tough and they're going to have times where they don't want anything to do with you or they're embarrassed or they hate you and you'll go through those times. But if you can implement it early maybe and just keep on it and just reinforce, positive reinforcement of, you can be your own person and independent, that maybe that can help keep them at least aware of, like for myself, I still like sports, but now I'm to the point of I'm aware of the bread and circus aspect of it rather than I don't have to be infatuated with it, if that makes sense. It's just a form of entertainment.
Right. You
that
don't live and
can see
die
on the
with
side.
a loss, for example. You
Exactly.
don't get upset
I
when your
used to.
team loses. Like, nah, okay, that's them.
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, that sucks. Oh, well, whatever." And if they can kinda have that mentality of, "Okay, this is kinda what it looks like on the outside, um, and then I know what's really going on." That's okay. I can still work in this world. Where I get more concerned is, other than, I guess, we talk about the solution stuff, and Derek and everyone else giving up, and Catherine about talking about how to get around what's coming with digital ID and CBDCs. It's like, that's where I get a little scared, is like, I feel like once we have that, we're gonna have to have like alternate, type of society just to get through that. I don't know. I just because I don't have an answer, and I don't know what to do about that. That part scares me. The digital ID and CBDC, where they can just completely control you. I would feel like that's when you'd get another pandemic type, where
Or they'll have like or they'll sunset the Ray token, and all of a sudden, all the ones that you're holding, there are a couple of creators that reached out to me. They were left holding a bag. They weren't informed. They knew nothing about this. And then what they thought was thousands of dollars was worth zero. And that scares the hell out of me. I also have seen that this whole thing with regard to CBDC, not nearly that, but Tether, the digital dollar, Circle, and even Bitcoin. I've been calling that out as a Ponzi scheme for about 2 years now, because what we see is that every dollar that goes into that system to buy Bitcoin immediately gets sucked out and put into a Cayman Islands or Swiss bank account. They're not leaving the money in the system, and there's nowhere to necessarily, quote unquote, leave it, because there's no bank account for Bitcoin. There's no Federal Reserve for Bitcoin. Now, that's what Trump wants to build, but then it can't be a decentralized cryptocurrency if you have reserve currency somewhere. Like, then it becomes centralized, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Like, there's this weird balance, and I think a lot of people still don't understand it. And I'm still frustrated with the level of fees that are associated with transacting because of the amount of power that's required. In the end, the guys that built these systems will end up taking all your money, because you'll end up having to give it up in fees. We saw that with Steve on the Ray tokens, because for a long time, Ray was on the Ethereum network. And if you didn't switch over at one point, you were paying out huge money in ETH fees, gas fees, just to be able to get your Ray tokens out. And nobody gives you an education about this stuff. Nobody's regulating anything about this stuff. And even the token issuers are not properly educating the token holders about it. And the whole thing just feels like a big scam and a grift. That if you're not in on the inside and you aren't controlling exactly how it's going and the schedule, you're going to end up left holding a bag somewhere at some point. And that's been my experience with crypto, unfortunately. I wish it weren't the case. I've been an investor in crypto. I hold a bunch. I bought, $100 worth of some shit coins back, 3-4 years ago. Some of them I still have. I got rid of most of them, but I still have some. Hoping that at one point, one of them might take off. I don't think at this point, everyone's talked about XRP, this Ripple. Ripple is the only one that I think that's done even somewhat. And there's a lot of question over whether that's a scam too. So it's all to be determined about what's going to happen with the future of money. The way that they put Doge as a level in between government, as a firewall between government and the oligarchy class, and now Elon basically has control and access to all of our data, which somebody valued at over $1 trillion worth of information. It's worth even more than that, I would guess. And again, like, how do we, somebody said to start typing lines of junk and mixing that into your stuff so that it never really gets a feel for who you quite are, and you'll always be able to tell when it's artificial. It's one solution. I think that even Corbett's solution was to start putting a little bit of garbage into the machine. So the garbage in, garbage out, it's still a machine. it can only spit back to you what it's being fed. The thing that worries me about that is you've got AI then making up whole cloth stories that didn't exist. We've already seen that happen multiple times.
Oh yeah.
Controversies about people that never happened that could get them canceled or whatever. Held out from getting a job potentially because somebody Googled them and read some story that never really happened or was spun a different way. I've seen all this stuff already, and it's still really early on, and we haven't even gotten to the good deepfakes yet.
Right?
Holy shit.
And I've been waiting on those. And even the funny ones was like the Door Brothers and stuff like that. I mean, we're not even close to what, they've been talking about and trying to, how long was it? Almost like 4+ years ago they were talking about, well, don't believe any deep fakes if they come out about us. A lot of politicians is like, what are you guys trying to warn us about? Like what? Or did you actually have film of stuff and you're worried about deep, like there's a lot of crazy stuff that could happen with there.
I think AI I actually saved one of those AI Taylor Swift ones that they worked really hard to scrub the internet of. Okay, I saved one of them. One of my favorites. I didn't want to let that completely die. But yeah, this is what I mean. They're trying to memory hold stuff so that like people be like, what? There was an AI porn Taylor Swift thing? Yeah, there was for about 2 days. It was a sensation across the entire internet. Like you couldn't go anywhere without seeing some type of a Taylor Swift naked picture somewhere. Where else can I go with that? Well, we're coming up on
well, you can get to
minutes.
The point of
I think that's a good place to kind of AI porn and AI deep porn. Fakes and everything. It's a good place to stop for now. Man, I could talk to you for hours. This is always fun.
Same here, man.
I love hanging with you on Fridays at an AM Wake Up. I'm glad you're in this space, and we need more people out there doing this like you do. I want to show people very quickly your different social media pages so they know where to find you. This is your Twitter at the IND Review, and then you can go to indreview.substack.com, and he puts up all of the episodes, usually in a pretty timely fashion. It may be 3-4 in a batch, but you'll get a good fire hose. And this is all ad free, by the way. I love Substack because they don't stick commercials into your stuff. All right.
That's what's great.
All right. And then shout out to Odyssey too. Odyssey doesn't put commercials in. And look at that. I think that is the episode 100 episodes ago that I ran on INN or on my channel when I first host streamed it. How cool that's pinned. 29 followers. Come on, everyone. You got to help him out. Get over to Odyssey. Go follow the Independent Review. Same thing over on Rumble. He's over on Rumble. So go follow the Independent Review over on Rumble. Now, he does have a YouTube channel, but I would
suggest if you go there, just follow the wrestling. Just follow the wrestling. It's funny.
Follow for the IMA, for the wrestling. And then, like he talked about, that he's got a shop. He does T-shirts and merch. Big Frog is the name of that company. And he actually made a Big Frog store for INN that's going to be published in the near future, where we've got all of our shirts and all of our merch there, hoodies and stickers and beanies. You can go and check that out and support independent writers, independent creators, independent shops that'll make your stuff. The one thing I also wanted to show, like I said, is this guy's an independent and an Indie Media Award honoree. All right. Zago Brothers made this beautiful illustration of him. I was going to put that in the thumbnail, but nobody recognizes him by that illustration. Right. Yeah, no. So I put the one from the logo in. But dude, shout out to Lucio Zago for making that gorgeous illustration. If you want to follow all of Ryan's links, I've got them all linked right there on this webpage. And I'll put a link to this in the description as well. So you can go right there and subscribe and support there. Yeah, man. Again, really appreciate what you do. Glad that there's more people aggregating stuff than just me. And we're going to keep doing this.
I appreciate you having me. And, you've been one of the first to reach out to me and, help me get to where I am. And I appreciate it, man. You're always there to help people that don't know, just behind the scenes. If it's something with like, hey, you could fix this, or with that, with me not know, or just doing 15 things at once, I don't see stuff and you'll catch it. And I love it because any kind of helpful, tips I can have. Like Indy's doing 1,000 things and he's still willing to reach out and help on things, which I think is awesome. And I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, because that's what we support, independent media. That's what I do here.
Yeah.
So I say we need it more than ever. Support independent media. I love you all, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.
You can't keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison. No, I play civil when all these dead won't make you listen. What's more American than slaying your oppressors? What's more American than liberty or death first? God, I thought we were founded on abolishing the tyranny of those who would starve a village all to live empirically. And I regret that I have only one life to give for my cause now that I can see the cause so clearly. See, I want our leaders, regardless of party, to fear me.